Cool. Hey, everybody. Jim Benton here from Chorus. We've got Matt Heinz with me from Heinz Marketing. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm good. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's 8:35 a.m. here in the Pacific time. Same for you as well.
Yep.
And I just appreciate you helping us kick off the day. I thought it'd be great for us to share some data. And, as I was getting ready for this, Matt, you've got so much experience in sales and marketing. And I know we go back to even our ClearSlide days. I just couldn't wait to kind of dig in, and just the breadth that you have with so many different customers right now in the space. Looking forward to getting your perspectives on cold calls and just in general, what we're seeing out in the market today. Before we jump into that stuff, I'm curious how you are doing. How are you surviving? How is this? Just how's your family, and just how are you holding up?
Well, thank you for asking. Just candidly, I think, about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, like business or the pipeline just dried up completely. And not meaning it went away. It just, everything kind of froze solid. I think just the shell shock of everything that's going on, people just like, what the heck, and aren't making decisions. So that, sucked a month ago, but literally as of a week ago yesterday, like almost like there's a switch that got flipped. And now people are like, okay, we still have to work. We still have to sell. We still have to move our way through this. And so the last week has been just crazy, just getting calls and getting interest. And I'll tell you what, I mean, aside from a few obvious industries, all the other conversations we're having with clients and with prospects and people in our network across various industries, I'm impressed at how many people are just like, listen, like we got a job to do. Like we will get through this by doing what we do best, whether that's serving their customers, helping their employees. So, this may suck for a little while to have to work from home. And we were joking earlier about how bad Heinz homeschool is going right now. Yeah. But I think we're going to be okay. And I'm very optimistic based on what I'm hearing from the market right now.
It's interesting. And when you think of, we've all been studying the news and the data on COVID. And, a few weeks ago is incredibly scary. I mean, you'd go from working to how do I make sure we have enough food the next day, and you sneak out at night, and it was an awkward balance. Yet right now, the real challenge of COVID is hitting many cities. I mean, you saw the president speak last night, yet business is starting to get back. I mean, we've had this dialogue in my household, how it's actually getting really real right now, yet we're seeing people have more optimism on commerce. And that's why we're doing this, by the way, is to help make sure we keep people coming together to solve problems and transact, as that's the other half. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. I think this month actually could be a little scary. I mean, the numbers that they're talking about, not only how long it's going to take to peak and what we're already seeing in certain markets with, hospitals being overwhelmed, like that's a little scary. But I think, they're by better understanding what the path is forward, even if it's scary, it helps us understand what it might look like on the other side and when that might potentially happen. This is not an apocalyptic event. This isn't, a meteor hitting the earth in 3 months. Like we're going to get past this. One of the other analogies that I liked a lot, and this is, I don't know, he probably stole it from somewhere else, but a friend of mine who runs a communications firm sent something his clients talking about straightaways and curves. And he said, I'm not a race car guy, but like the last 10 years, we've been on a straightaway. We've been in a great market, a great bull market, just going nuts, going forward. We just hit a curve, and great race car drivers know that you have to be smart about going through a curve. You got to look at your instruments and watch your trajectory, and watch how much you're turning the wheel, and watch your speed. Great race car drivers also know that you win the race in the curve. You win the race by knowing when in the curve to start accelerating. You have to accelerate before you leave the curve. So we have two jobs in business right now. We have one is figuring out how to get through the curve without crashing. Yeah. But two is knowing when do we start accelerating again? And that's part of what I'm starting to see people say to us, and people realize in the B2B world where I think we both operate, is that, we're in a curve now, but I think we are starting to figure out how to calibrate the car through the curve. Let's get ready for the straightaway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been sharing in the past that I started a company, 5 days after the bottom of the market batch in March of 2009. And it just meant that people focused on what mattered. You had to solve real problems for people to pay attention, and the best stuff wins at that time. And it wins because you're truly helping people. So if you can do that and it matters, it works. I wanted to ask you about the data I shared yesterday around cities. You're up in Redmond. Well, you're near Redmond, I think in Kirkland. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I know you're one of the first cities that we had been talking about being hit by the COVID-19. Yet it's seen, week over week a lift. You just even started this by saying that you saw business back. What are you seeing up in the kind of Seattle area?
Well, I think you mentioned earlier, like people worried about where they're going to get food. There's plenty of toilet paper up here. There's plenty of, most people have sanitizers back. I mean, so I think where a week or so ago, as more cities shut down, like they started getting runs on weird things. Here it's kind of back to normal. I mean, you want to take precaution not to get or to spread things if you go to the market. But every time I've gone to, the market or Costco out here in the last 10 to 14 days, like they have everything. So I think that we are a little ahead of that curve since things kind of started here. I mean, literally, Kirkland, if you remember those first cases at Life Care Center, that literally is like less than a half mile that way. It's eerily close to where we are. But I do think that now as people sort of adjust to this new normal and are no longer obsessing over the headlines and, my wife every morning, like, 'cause I get up early, she's like, well, what happened? Like, what do I need to know? I'm like, same stuff, right? It's not necessarily some new thing.
Yeah.
We're getting a little out of shell shock mode and we're getting into the rhythm of now, okay, here's how I work from home and here's what my schedule is going to look like. And even if we're, not great at setting boundaries between working and homeschool, monitoring, we're trying to get back to business. And so I think the Seattle number is going to be a little bit of an indicator of what's going to happen elsewhere across the country.
Look, it's encouraging. So as we've been sharing, people are continuing to meet and connect, which is healthy. Let's talk about cold calls today. That's the area that our research team has gone deep. And I just appreciate all the folks at Chorus that have been pulling this data as we've been doing this now daily. We wanted to look specifically at the cold call rates. And, we've been sharing meeting-based data, but now we're looking at the dials and, the connect rates. And this is an area where from our data across the market, we're seeing a drop. So 42% from January down, and then week over week down another 27%. And so dials are down. Dials are hard right now. And I'm curious, does this resonate with you? What are you seeing across the customers you work with?
It does. And I think these numbers, I would be surprised if you don't see these numbers start to gradually go back up. I think two things are happening. One is you get more people working from home. Those office lines don't necessarily work anymore, right? And I think that, if people are distracted by the news and trying to figure out how to keep their kids occupied, they may be less likely to pick up the phone, even if it does, redirect to a VoIP on their computer, laptop, or to their cell phone. So that makes sense to me. There's been a lot of talk just in sort of the sales and marketing community over the last month about like, is it still okay to sell? Is it still okay to market as business as usual? I even posed the question a couple weeks ago, just saying like, okay, is there an ethical question of whether or not we should sell right now, right? And I think, it's an interesting conversation. I think my long answer is yes. I think if you've got something that is valuable for your audience, just like any time, if you've got something that's useful, you have an opportunity and responsibility to make sure you're bettering the lives and businesses of your clients. The cold call drop, I think, is many companies not sure how to do that. Because if you just call, like I continue to get emails on a regular basis from people that are just, that seem like they are now aggressively pitching just because they're worried about hitting their number. You can look tone deaf. And so I think a lot of companies are worried about that. I think a lot of individual sales reps are worried about how they sound. But, this goes back to an age-old question of like, is cold calling dead? It's like, well, the cold part of calling has always been dead. If you're calling just to get 15 minutes of someone's time, if you're calling just to pitch your wares, like that sucks now. That has always sucked, right? So, you have to call with something of value. And today, I think you've got some data showing how often COVID-19 is being referenced in calls. I think investing in that small talk, asking people how they're doing. Is your family good? Are you guys staying healthy and safe? Is there anything you guys need? I mean, these are things you can do to show some empathy to your customers beyond just sort of the traditional initial, small talk.
I think about just even the words we use right now. Maybe it's a bit dramatic, but I've been kidding even with our team that, I don't want to call this a webinar. Webinar is an old world term. I don't want to talk about that. I want to do a briefing of real data that could help people make decisions so that they can continue to hire, so that they don't lay off people, and that we show that the world is still transacting. The second thing is sales. You're right. I just don't like the concept of that word. I mean, I've been a seller my whole career, but we're problem solvers. And if you are solving people's problems, then, when people say, should we still solve problems right now? Absolutely. There's no better time to do that. The question is, we're all representing different products and how to make sure it is relevant at the time. And, these are tricky things we're all balancing right now.
Well, there's another way to think about this is, as as markets, as governments say, like, we want you to shelter in place, right? We want you to just stay home. You can go out and exercise, you can go in your yard,
Yeah.
but shelter in place, we're leaving essential services open. So that's an interesting thought in B2B, right? Like, if you're an essential service in the consumer space, I need my supermarket, I need the pharmacy, I need doctors' offices to stay open. If you're in B2B and still selling right now, what is your essential service? Like, what are you offering to your customers that they can't live without? Like, it's a good question at any point, in the ebb and flows of the market and the economy and time, but especially now, like,
Yeah.
what is it about what you do that is essential for your customers to continue to operate, to continue to work through this, to continue to grow even in times of adversity?
Yeah.
I think, thinking through what that message is, even if you're not launching a new product, but thinking about just what features, what benefits you are promoting and sort of highlighting right now can make a big difference. And some of that, in terms of the cold call rate, it's not just coming up with that message, but it's giving your sales team confidence to get on the phone. I bet you a lot of good salespeople right now are like, I just don't want to bug people. I don't want to sound bad. Give them a message, give them a progression that gives them confidence to get on the phone, to know that they are providing value to the people.
It's funny. I'm a big fan of the Jim Collins, built to last, the methodology around purpose. Found that over the years, just in these startups. I think that this is the time when you really need to know what the purpose of your product is. How does it help people? Not the goal, not the hit X millions of users and all those things, but just how do we help people? And that's the message that I find that's resonating, the most. And we all have a purpose, or we wouldn't be doing the work we do, but making sure that we're kind of going deep on that. Matt, one thing that caught us on the data as we went deep in this is that the conversion rates, the connect rate, actually didn't drop that much. Remember, at 9.6, it's down a little bit, but for those that are doing outbound, that are making the dials, people are still picking up. People are still actually connecting. So the volume is down, but the actual success rate. And so it's interesting that when we do make the calls, people, they want to talk, or they're more available, or they're taking the time to engage our teams. Is that also something that you're hearing out there as you've been talking to folks?
I am. I'm seeing it. I'm hearing it from the companies we're working with. I'm seeing it myself. I mean, just anecdotally, in a normal course of action, like, I see a number I don't recognize, I don't pick it up now. Like, my world has shrunk significantly. I'm sitting here in my basement bunker. We were joking earlier, like, I literally sit on Zoom calls like all day long now. So someone randomly calling, I'm like, if it's a bad cold call, I can hang that up. But someone else to talk to right now might not be a bad thing. I think there's something to that, right? To take advantage of just a little bit of variety, a little bit of a distraction for people. I think also what data also tells me is, despite like why it's happening, like, you would think it's harder to get a hold of people now that they're not in their offices, now that they're distracted by things at home. And because if this data hasn't gone down that much, it's another reason why, cold calling, why the telephone in general is still a super valuable tool for salespeople. Like, if this number all of a sudden in this moment went down to like 2 or 3%, then you could say, well, this may be the beginning of the end. Look at this. It's not going down that much, right? You're still 1 out of 10 people you're getting a hold of. So if you're a cold caller, if you're someone who's prospecting, like, that's a number you can model against. That's a number you can profitably generate pipeline against.
So we've been making these daily briefings live just to have people engaged. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. I'm curious, those that are on here, we've got a great group. I'm going to launch a quick poll here. What do you think is the main reason for cold calls being down, cold dials being down? So let's just kind of see what others out there are saying. So once again, here's the question. What do you think is the main reason for cold call dials being down? Is it the lack of cell phone numbers, which I actually want to talk to you about that in a second, how we might get this data to make sure we're all looking at the same things. Is it SDR struggling to stay productive? Is it the uncertainty and just not feeling, like this is the time to reach out, or just not having the compassion? So just waiting. So let's see, we got results coming in. Looks like one of the top areas here is in the lack of cell phone numbers. So we're about 68% on lack of cell phone numbers. Matt, let's talk about that. How are you getting the data on, how are you getting the data for cell phone numbers, and what are you seeing folks out there doing for that?
Well, I mean, it's tactics, right? It comes down to, like, I think about that for me now. I'm I'm trying to, make a goal of at least 10 phone calls a day to people that are in my network that some of I haven't talked to in a while. And if I don't have their number, there's a couple places I can look. One, you can look at LinkedIn. If you're connected with someone on LinkedIn and you go to their contact info, a lot of people have their cell phone number right there. I would look at, obviously signature lines. A lot of people just have their cell phone, their mobile number right in their signature line.
Yep.
Look in your CRM, look in Salesforce, and it's possible that the number is in there from someone else or it's been pulled in. We use a tool that it's now owned by Drift that will go and look at all of our auto responses from our emails and pull in contact information, populate CRM. I also use a tool called Lead IQ. And even if it's someone that I already have in my database, I'll pull them up anyway. And sometimes Lead IQ will have a cell phone number just listed, right there in the sidebar of the browser.
Makes sense. I know in my last group, Apollo, we had cell phone data and dial data for everybody just to make sure that we could reach out. So there's a lot of tools out there. And for those that aren't using them, do some quick research because people are still talking. And as Matt and I have both said, we're sitting here at home. I'll take a phone call right now. It'd be nice to talk to a stranger a little bit more. Here's one other data point I wanted to share is that in these cold calls, we are talking about COVID. It's now 100% of all dials. We're going to start, or the teams are starting by saying, some mention of COVID. The question for us, it's up 13x just in the last month. We get it, but is this the right way to start a call? Or just what advice would you have on, the approach that people should use as they're reaching out?
Well, I think, selling with empathy is always a good idea, and doing that right now is also important. I think, in a normal circumstance, I would say, don't ask your customers what keeps them up at night, tell them what should be keeping them up at night. But I think right now, starting with something that just says, hey, I first want to just say, how are you doing? How are you adjusting? How's family? Are you guys safe and healthy? I think I saw someone use the phrase home, happy and healthy. Something like that. So you don't have to call. So, hey, how about that pandemic, huh? I think that's getting tired already, but asking someone about how they're doing, asking, how's your family? Are you staying healthy? Do you need anything? That's always a good way to sort of start a conversation, sort of putting the focus on them and showing that you actually have some authentic care for someone on the other side beyond just, I want to show you my demo or talk about a product.
I think that's the magic right now is the authentic aspect of this. Just for everybody working through tough times, not to minimize that, but authenticity brings us together. I saw our team shared a great email that they got from a vendor pitching us. And it was just authentic. It was a photo of an individual in their own home with their dog and just explaining why they reached out, why they're still taking the time, why this was not a drip or robotic email. And, it worked. It went to, hundreds of people in our company saying, check out this note. This is a guy we want to talk to here. One last part on the data is I had shared at the beginning of the week, I've been really focused on just overall productivity and showing to the community that people are still selling. If we look at dials being down, the question here is we're still meeting people. So are we leaning more on LinkedIn? Are we leaning more on the tools that you mentioned? The one observation I'm having is I think that inbound, people there's certain sectors that are seeing a huge influx of inbound. We've seen it in the collaboration space. We've seen it in infrastructure and security. What are you seeing on the inbound side? What are you hearing, if anything, on that side?
Well, I certainly think over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, metrics around certain content channels has gone up significantly. People are working from home. Even if they're doing a lot of meetings with their home, there isn't commute time anymore. So people have more time in their day versus where they did when they were having to go into the office. We're seeing across the board content consumption habits going up, more traffic to website, more traffic to blogs. The one content channel that seems to be down is podcasts. I think we're realizing how many people were listening to podcasts on the way to and from work. Podcast consumption is down. It'll be interesting. One thing that'll be interesting to see is will the decrease in calls be an early indicator of a future decrease in meetings, right? Because the call comes first to set up a meeting potentially. But I do think, in certain industries, I think I've got a friend here locally who he runs marketing for a company that does marketing packages and technology for plastic surgeons and in the cosmetic medical industry. Well, elective surgeries are out for a while, so they're in hunker down mode, right? But a lot of other companies either are seeing an insurgence of demand and need right now, or as we talked about earlier, are sort of coming through this initial malaise and saying, okay, this is going to get ugly, but at least we have a better view of what's going to happen. So let's get back to work so we can accelerate through the curve. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of a dip in meetings because of that dip in calls. But as that call volume goes back up and as you see more inbound requests from people that are using this moment to research and take advantage of things that they didn't have time for before, I think we'll continue on this. I mean, the one thing that gives me a lot of optimism is, going into this, the economy was in a pretty strong place. A lot of companies were doing very well. This is a major disruption. And, if we're closing parts of the economy, then obviously that's going to have an impact. But I'm optimistic that we'll bounce back. And I think especially in the B2B space, because a lot of us can continue to do work and continue to do business as usual, even from the basement down here. I think, there may be a dip in some of these metrics, but I think that we'll get back to normal pretty soon.
I appreciate that. Well, look, as we close up, on our side, we want to help everyone get access to data like this for their own team. So we're doing a bunch of programs to be flexible and accommodating. So come to Chorus.ai and we will work with your team to make sure they can get in and understand your market. Matt, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. Nice to see another friendly face today, and good luck with everything. Stay safe, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you very much. You as well.
All right, cheers. Bye.